Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they, and in this video we're going to explore the folkloric tradition of Italy and the UK for the month of November 2025. But before we get started, hey, I've opened a coffee and memberships are open. Now you can support my work directly and you can even get extra goodies in return, because thank you. There's a Discord, there are live streams. If you'd like to check it out, check out Coffee, where you can also get tarot readings with me Italian style, and the low income option there starts at £5. And for the foreseeable future, part of my profits from tarot readings go directly to support Questue to Gaza, who support Palestinians refugees in Cairo, and the Good Law Project, who's trying to bring trans rights back to the UK, because trans rights are human rights. So if you decide to support me there, hey, thank you so very much. Here's the deal. I am partial here because November is my favorite month of the year. You would think that as a witch, an ex-goth kid, and all around cozy and liking the vibe of autumn, my month would be October. Nah, it's always been November. I like November so much that we got married in November, which I appreciate. It's not necessarily the kind of month that people think about getting married into. And it's their loss in a way, because, venues are cheaper and I don't know. I love November. I'm very glad that we've come to November. So between the UK and Italy, admittedly, there is the shared tradition of Samhain and all those kind of festivals that are around the end of October and beginning of November. In Italy, we'll see it in the part dedicated to Italy. It actually goes on for 12 days. And in general, in both countries, it is recognized that it was a line of passage between the old and the new year. I know that Samhain is said to be, the witch's new year, which, still applies. But it's interesting to see that there is a foundation about that, of what comes about in folkloric tradition, in farmers' tradition, which, as you know, it's my background. Like that's what my grandparents used to do in Italy. I like that even in the British Almanac it mentions St. Martin's Day, which is the 11th of November, which would be the last day of the 12 days that we celebrate in Italy, or that were celebrated in Italy, as I mentioned. And it was considered the old Halloween, and the Italian part will explain us why, actually. Let's go into moons. The full moon in November is called the darkest depths moon, the morning moon. I want to say the beaver moon, according to my calendar there. It's a lot of names for this moon. But the most important thing is that this moon is going to be full in Taurus on the 5th of November. And much like last month, it's another super full moon, like when the moon is particularly closer to Earth, and so it looks particularly bigger because it actually is a bit closer. Which also means that it will have an effect on the tides. They will be much more pronounced. The super full moon in Taurus, ruled by Venus, is in her element during this season for the senses, as she is all about embodiment and sensuality. In order to fully indulge, she also has a focus on material security, so you may find this Taurus supermoon shining her light into your counting house. It would be time to check your winter stores. Perhaps you are questioning your self-worth or feeling wobbly about your financial security. So that is what our spells for this full moon should be focused on. That is all about stability, security, and all those things that have to do with the material and practical stability and safety. Sun, is it the best angle that you can be at right now? Taurus moon magic. With the moon in Taurus, it's time to work magic for money and long-lasting results. The fixed earth, it's not cardinal, it's fixed. The fixed earth energy of this moon can bring stability into your magic, such as to secure finances, assets, and wealth in the long run. Work with greenery, garden, and earth-related magic. Shining through this Venus-ruled goddess sign, the Taurus moon invites you to engage your senses in your magic and incorporate a pinch of sensuality, perhaps even using aromatic flowers for efforts related to self-value and beauty. In partnerships, focus on curating intimacy to create long-lasting connections. Goddess associated with cows, the moon, and Venus, such as Hathor or Ishtar, are allies to your spell work now. And admittedly, if I have to think about a sign that the moon needs to be in for me to want to do money magic, it would be the moon in Taurus indeed. Now, when it comes to full moons, it's good to keep in mind that for it to be a full moon, the moon is in direct opposition to the sun, which means that the sun is currently in Scorpio, so you have this contrast and push and pull in between Scorpio and Taurus, where the Sun and the Moon are. The sharp contrast between two fixed energies, stable and comfortable Taurus and intense Scorpio, while Taurus full moon is powerful for many Taurus teams, healing can be found in balancing the Sun and the Moon. Are you too unmoving, or do you plunge into deep side of the pool unafraid to make a splash or drown? Since Taurus deal with wealth and Scorpio can relate to joint financial dealings, the Taurus full moon can be fruitful for magic that seeks to change your financial situation and debts. Taurus' long-lasting nature in relationships, coupled with Scorpio's passionate energy, can also make this a romantic full moon, which, if you consider that Taurus is ruled by Venus, makes even more sense. Date night on the 5, but like in the house, because going out on a full moon, it seems like everybody's energy is high, so it's the kind of thing that I would celebrate and do stuff, but at home. Getting to the 20th of November, we have our new moon in Scorpio. Now, Scorpios get a bad rep because intense, because the house that is usually ruled by Scorpio and Pluto is the 8th house, which relates to finances, but also death. So, it's a bit intense. It's a bit intense, I understand. I don't have Scorpio really placements in my birth chart, but I probably have a soft spot because my grandmother was Scorpio. She was born on the 29th of October, 1911. So I always related very well with her, and so probably that put a bit of a positive bias on me about Scorpio in general. There's this intensity, there's this passion, but there's also a way to materialize it in practical ways, and I think that's the reason why the 8th house in Scorpio are also related to long-term financial workings and financial mergings. So say when you marry or you have a partner and sort of you come together as a household kind of thing. The new moon in Scorpio, it's a time of intensity and transformation. Scorpio digs deep to reveal the true light within us. This new moon calls to the phoenix to rise from the fire, burning through all that is holding us back. Are you willing to acknowledge the things that drag you along? Are you willing to acknowledge the things that you drag along that weigh you down? Can you identify the clutter in your dark corners that need to be brought into the light to be transformed? This new moon will honor your commitment to rise unencumbered. And when we go into moon magic, indeed, the new moon in Scorpio, which happens now, in November, is indeed ideal for all those workings that have to do with uncovering the truth because of Scorpio truth-seeking energy, and to get into the heart of things and understand what motivations are. Because Scorpio can encourage investigation of the ego and reveal inner truths, repeating partners and karmic issue may be exposed, but this recognition allows them to be powerfully changed, transformed, and healed. The Scorpio moon also favors efforts of banishing and ending important parts of transformation. The sharp stinger of this moon is also useful for cleansing and protection spells, which can help you maintain energetic boundaries. So considering that the new moon in Scorpio here in the UK happens at like 7 a.m. on Thursday the 20th of November, I'd say that the Wednesday and the Thursday you can use in full to do any kind of protection, cleansing, banishing. It's good work. I would have said usually to do those on a Saturday, which still applies because, Saturn, and that's the kind of planet that works around these things. But being also the domain of the sign of Scorpio, with the moon in Scorpio, those 2 days could be an interesting proposition to do this kind of workings. I've mentioned it before, the British Almanac this year has the theme of megaliths, and the megalith of this month of November is Long Meg and her daughter. I didn't know about so many stone circles and thingies here in the UK, and actually the Almanac really helped me discover those. Like, I loved the one about the Kaileak that we talked about last month, 2 months ago. There are so many things that I didn't know about, and as soon as I can drive, I want to check them all out. But this is the story of Long Meg, which is in Cumbria. The circle has suitably witchy associations. I've always said association, but I can't now. Suitably witchy associations. The circle has suitably witchy associations for the dark and spooky time of the year. Long Meg herself resembles a witch's face from a certain angle. One story goes that the stones were a medieval coven of witches led by Long Meg, turned to stone for their wickedness by a wizard. It's always man, isn't it? It's always man. I wonder what the wickedness was there. Another asserts that she was a local witch, Meg de Maldon, whose daughters were turned to stone for dancing on the Sabbath to a fiddler with cloven hoofs. God forbid a girl as a hobby, eh? The stones are said to be impossible to count, or if they are successfully counted, the counter will be turned to stone themselves. While most of the stones in the circle are local and Long Meg herself is a local red sandstone, there are 4 quartz stones placed at intervals around the circle, and it is thought that they may mark calendarical events. The circle has both a midwinter alignment and a Samhain All Souls Day alignment. Archaeological evidence has suggested that this was a place of gatherings. Do I even need to go in sunrise and sunset? Because there's not much there. Like, on the 1st of November, the sun rises just after 7 a.m. and it sets at 4:30, and by the 30th, the sun rises at 8 a.m. and it sets a little before 4 p.m. It's so little light, it's so little light. But here's the good news. Once we get to December, when we'll do the 1st and the 31st of December, past the solstice, it'll start slowly to get long. So this is really the darkest that it gets. Okay, no, we're doing the story of the month about the stars because this is so cool. I love this. So I don't remember in what video I mentioned it, but there was something about, fair play, the scientific method, we do believe in science here and all that kind of stuff, but there is an issue with Enlightenment having taken the magic out of things and having taken authority away from indigenous old ways to pass information. And one of these examples are indigenous stories from Australia that talk about huge, humongous, mastodontic animals, which they were always thought to be, just legends, just the kind of story, that you tell from generation to generation, and it's folkloric, it's not literal. And so it's always been dismissed with this kind of shrugging that it's not actual knowledge. Well, lo and behold, they found archaeological reports that testimony that hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were animals exactly that size in Australia. So what has got to us in the form of folkloric stories and legends were actually oral histories passed down. And this story of the month goes a bit in the same thing, because the story of the month is about the Pleiades that are called the Seven Sisters. Now, apparently, in pretty much every culture around the world, the story of the Seven Sisters goes in a way in which there are 7 stars in the Pleiades, but one gets lost. One of the sisters gets lost or gets killed, and the Native American have this kind of story, indigenous Australian have this kind of story, and there is even a cave painting in France dated 17,000 years ago that has the stars depicted as 6, not 7. Why is that? This blew my mind. So with the naked eye, you can only see 6 stars of the 7 Pleiades, and then actually with proper equipment you can see many more because it's a cluster. Fun story, I can never look at the Pleiades directly to actually see them, so I wouldn't even be able to count them. But here's the thing, with the naked eye you can see 6. But all these indigenous stories have stories about the 7 sisters, and if anything, one gets lost. Well, what do you know? It's the kind of description of something that has happened historically. So at some point, because the Pleiades are not static, you could see with your naked eye that there were 7 stars, not 6. The movement happened with, I think, Merope, the star that we call Merope. The movement of this star getting too close to another so that now we just see 6 happened 100,000 years ago. So all these stories and legends and folkloric ways to report, oh, there were 7 sisters, but one get lost. They are all descriptions of something that actually happened and described the way that astronomically, from seeing 7 stars, you could now just see 6. And the fact that the last time that people without telescopes could see with the naked eye 7 stars being 100,000 years ago, it means that it predates Homo sapiens leaving Africa for the rest of the world. That is how long the oral history likely has got the stories true. And to me that's fascinating, because it proves a point of how much value those kind of stories have, despite the fact that there are things that you can't measure or haven't been passed on. This is prehistory, like it couldn't be written. That's the point of prehistory. We are in history since there are written down testimonies. But no, this is prehistory, and it's still valid. It was just passed orally, and it was made into stories, rather than being the clinical way that we do pass information now. And I think it's worth paying attention to these things. This is the value of tradition. The one value of tradition. Dare I say. Because otherwise, Nazis jumped on this. Public service announcement if you are UK based and you get the Llewellyn calendars yearly, as I do. I have a little shop on Etsy. I don't talk often about it, but I should. And usually calendars and diaries are my best sellers of the year, and what we do in those few months really help us throughout the year. So if you are based in the UK and you would like to get a Llewellyn calendar, a Llewellyn datebook, or even the Llewellyn spell a day, well, there's a coven of two, and I'll leave the link down in the description below, so you can check it out and you can support us directly. Thank you so much. Right, let's go to Italy. November, as I said, like my favorite month. It used to be my favorite month in Italy as well, in fairness, because it has that same mood of everything is dark. Not as dark as here though. Everything is dark. And so even just the fact that cars have to turn on their lights made it, in my child head, look like everything was always with like fairy lights. And in Italy, we don't have the culture of fairy lights that we have here in the UK or anywhere else, really. Like in Italy, fairy lights are really just something that you use for Christmas. And if you use it beyond Christmas, which I used to do, they look down on you for everything, let's be honest. Like, it's the issue of Italy. But, you know, since we're talking about this, maybe we just go and talk about the legends. Like, you don't hear me yap about the issues that Italy have, because there are a lot. So as I mentioned vaguely last month, and now we're gonna go into it, the way that Italy sees the 31st of October, the 1st of November, which is All Saints, the 2nd of November, which is the Day of the Dead, actually is not limited to those 3 days. It used to be 12 days, the Dodekaemeron of the Dead, which lasted until St. Martin's Day, which lasted until St. Martin's Day, which we have seen in the British Almanac. Here was also considered Old Halloween. That's probably the reason why, like, those 12 days are intensely felt around the concept of dead and death and ancestors. One interesting thing about these 12 days, 31st of October to the 11th of November, is that, as we have seen that is pretty common to do in Italy, these are prophetic days. So from each one of these days and how the weather will be on that day, you can prophesize what each month of the year to come, of 2026 in this case, would be like weather-wise. Now, on the 10th of November, I don't know why November has so many saints that are from the area of Italy where I come from. I found it really bizarre. I had no idea before reading this, and I don't know, it made me think about the fact that is November inadvertently my favorite month, because on the calendar there was so much focus on the area I come from. I didn't know about it. But anyway, the 10th is San Baudolino, and the legend around him is that he went to this little village in northwest Italy that was infested by geese. Yeah, geese were seen as the psychopomp animal. So I think in this story the geese represent paganism and the way that Baudolino came and kicked out all the bad geeses. And that's just a metaphor for Christianity winning over paganism, so I don't necessarily adore this. Now, on the 11th, as mentioned, we have San Martino. He is known for this legend where it's very, very cold. He has just one cape, but he decides to share his cape with this very poor person. And the moment that he's sharing the cape with this person, actually the weather turns good so that neither of them has to die of cold, die of freezing or hypothermia. And that's why I think in Italy you expect to have the summer of San Martino, which is supposed to be on the 11th of November. You have the last day or few days of nice weather before going into the dark, into the rain, into even the snow going up to the solstice. What is interesting is that apparently San Martino has taken over a Celtic god that it makes sense if in Italy was followed, because as I mentioned before, in the north and especially northwest, Celts were in Italy, and so the traditions of Samhain that we have seen in October, it makes sense that they are merged because Celts were in northwest Italy. And apparently a god of the Celts that there was in Italy and was worshipped was Sucellus, and he was identified with the hammer for thunder, so I think in some ways it was syncretized to Thor. The wheel, both of the year or for the sun. Having a beard, so some sense of maturity, and grapes and wine, because by San Martino, by the 11th of November, you have the first wine, the young wine, the Vino Novello, which usually is the one that you can get drunk on so easily because it's very, very sweet. You don't have the perception that there's alcohol, but oof, if there's a lot of alcohol. And the true story is, careful. Something that surprised me, and I didn't know from Italy, is that during this time and up to Christmas, past San Martino, you have the minor Lent. So what I think happens is that not necessarily fasting like full on, but people were doing some sort of like purifying way of eating, sort of like it's done during Lent for, showing how closer sacrificing food makes you to God, which is an incredible colonial and patriarchal way to see things, and the reason why fat phobia foments patriarchy and all the systems related to it. But I'll leave you books down in the description below about that. We're not going to go into it now. But it's interesting that when girls wanted to take power over their own life and decisions, one way to do that would be to stop eating altogether, so that priests and popes and stuff would start to pay attention to you, because you would start to see or have visions or say that you've had visions, and the thinner you were getting, the closer to God. It's fucked up. But yeah, I'll leave you sources about that. Yeah, the way that thinness and not eating and sacrifice are problematically elevated in Christianity and religion in general. When it's organized, it's problematic, and it's misogynistic, and it's fatphobic, and yeah. Another curious thing, it's something that we saw in September, that there was the saying of Fare San Michele, because when farmers would have their contracts of working a certain piece of land from a landlord, the contracts would expire in September, and those that weren't expired in September would expire in November at San Martino. So you would either do Fare San Michele or Fare San Martino, which would mean to move, because if your contract was over and the landlord didn't want to renew it, then you had to find a new farm, a new piece of land to farm. Now, we have talked before about, trick-or-treating and where that tradition comes from. Well, in Italy, the kind of tradition is called Questue, when you go around collecting food. And, throughout the years, there are a few of those. And these ones that go from the 31st of October up until the 11th of November are indeed done to gather offerings for the dead and the ancestors, and sort of keep them good and keep them well and keep them in favor, so that they sort of protect the fields before you start working them again in the new year. Here's another thing that I didn't know, and I think it's of Celtic origin as well, or Saxon. It's the wild hunt. So in Italy it's called la caccia selvaggia or la cassa morta. And I didn't know, and reading the description was very fascinating. So this is a phenomenon where people genuinely testify to have seen, especially over the hills. So I imagine over the hills when there's fog as well, so it sort of creates optic illusions. People swear to have seen these charges of battalions. Then when you see them closer and closer, you realize are dead people and gods and sometimes the devil, and you have dogs, and it's not a nice thing. And it's not a nice thing to see it, because if you see it, usually means that you're going to pass soon and become part of the wild hunt. So the first record of this is in like 1091 by a friar, that they saw the wild hunt on the 1st of January 1091. And they were genuinely believing that they were actual people until they saw them close. It's a fascinating and terrifying story at the same time. Some people think that actually it has to do with the March of the Valkyries, so it might be connected to Odin. It's fascinating, and it happens, it's something known about in Italy, and I've looked around, and on Wikipedia it goes back to connected to, indeed, North Germanic traditions. But they also have a version in the other parts of North Europe, and they have a version of it here in the UK as well. Here in Wales specifically, the Wild Hunt is led by Gwyn ap Nudd. Oh, it's very fascinating. Gwyn ap Nudd is supposed to be the king of the other world, of the Awen. What's it called? It's not the Awen. The Awen is his inspiration. What's the underworld of the fairies? Mara. Is it the Awen? Yeah. I thought the Awen was the inspiration.
Yeah, same place.
Okay.
You draw inspiration from Awen. The Awen is an internal space.
Okay. So yeah, Gwyn ap Nudd here is recognized as the king of fairies. In the books of Mara Starling, you have chants to say when you enter, forest and the space of the other world of Gwyn ap Nudd. And again, every region have their own legends about the wild hunt, and here in Wales is led by Gwyn ap Nudd. Interestingly, in Italy, the most common known version is the cagnolite. So it's when you see small lights moving around and you hear the wind, whistling in certain ways that it makes you think it's actually dogs woofing. And if that happens, you need to move onto the right of the path you're walking, pretend nothing is happening, or even draw a circle on the ground around you, because apparently there's a physical circle, none of the members of the wild hunt can come and get you. Which I think, as witches, we love a good circle, don't we? There we go. Here's another thing that I didn't know. On the 24th of November, there used to be a Roman pagan festival called the Brumalia, until Justiniano decided to end it in the 7th century, current era. And the Brumalia used to go on from the 24th of November until the Saturnalia, so until the solstice. And what is interesting is that Bruma in Italian, it's a variation of fog and ice. And so when you have ice crystals, that basically is the fog crystallized into ice, that's the Bruma. What I didn't know is that it comes from Brumalia, and the Brumalia were called as such, not so much because you have fog and ice, although they are typical of this time of the year. No. Brumalia were called so because Bruma meant breve, short, and it was because the days between the 24th of November and then the solstice are the shortest days of the year, the shortest light of the year, and so breve, short, it's Bruma, so Brumalia is for that, and then now the Bruma has become actually the way the fog crystallizes into ice when it's cold. And then you have the last 3 days of November, before the 30th of November, which is Sant'Andrea, which are considered the 3 darkest nights of the entire year. And once you get over them and you get to December, I don't know if it's because December then has the solstice, or if it's because, in Christian times, then getting into December, you start to have celebrations for St. Mary, and then you have Christmas, and so those are considered times, therefore, where you are more protected, or, they are admittedly around the solstice, so then things get better after that. But that we will see in December, because at the moment, we have exhausted our folkloric traditions and curiosities and legends for November, for the British and for the Italian folk. I hope you enjoyed this, and if not learned something, maybe at least it's been entertaining. And until the next video, I really hope that we can hex the patriarchy together, because there's need for it. Fluff, fluff, look at the fluff, fluff, fluff.